we do have about 2 dozen people that signed up for it, so I think we can start, right?
Yes. Hi, everyone. This is Christine Chen with Asian and Pacific Islander America Vote. Welcome today to our Norman Y. Mineta Leadership Institute. As this week's presentation and webinar has been underwritten by our sponsor, Glenn S. Fukushima. And today we're going to focus on a call to action, phone banking 101. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our National Field Director, Yi Chang.
Thank you, Christine. Hello, everyone. I have met some of you online. Those of you I haven't met, but welcome to our one of our 6-part Norman Mineta Leadership Institute series, webinar series. And so there will be 2 more after this, but this one is about phone banking, and I joined APIAVote back in March, and so it's been wonderful so far. We have less than 60 days to go, so we're pretty excited. And I just want to say before we get started that I know that there are many of you who are old hands at this. You've done this before. But for a lot of people who are just joining the campaign to reach out to our APIAVote, API community, we will have this available, recorded. And so for those who cannot join with us today, we'll have this available for them. And then also for people that you're going to recruit to reach out, to register and to get our folks out to vote this election cycle. I will quickly go over some of the agenda that we'll be talking about today. And so we're going to be talking about in this pandemic, how we can still do phone banking in a way that might even be more effective because everybody's at home. And so we're going to be talking about virtual phone banking, using the van, and what to expect. We're going to be talking about the van and basic phone banking 101, which many of you have been used to pre-pandemic, and there's a whole set of things to do to get ready for. But there might be some changes because of COVID, but we're going to carry on as if it's a normal activity. We're going to be talking about the planning, the timeline, how to recruit volunteers, and the usual myths and realities of phone banking, and what we should expect in terms of getting our volunteers ready for phone banking. Here are just some pictures of folks pre-pandemic where you can still sit together in a room and phone bank. And I think virtually we probably can't do that, but we will find other ways to be together, whether it's through another virtual platform of your choice. But we will still do phone banking in a new environment, different ways, using the same system. So really the purpose of phone banking is to get out the vote, get all of our APIs out to vote. I know that a lot of people are worried about the voting process, whether they can vote in person, whether they can trust the system to mail in their votes, to mail in their ballots. But our job is to call people on the phone to make sure that they're ready to go and vote this November. And the people we're targeting will be people who are in our community who do not vote as often, and they'll be receiving mail from us. We're doing a mail program right now, and it's going to the printer and should be hitting the mailboxes the first week of October. And so we want to make sure that our phone banking is aligned with the mail that they'll receive from us. And you all remember the old way of doing phone banking, right? Remember this, where you're handed a card, and so this is the whole way of doing things. And so we won't be using any of the paper that we're using before. I mean, a lot of the things we've done before. It takes time consuming. And there's really not a whole lot of information that are on these paper forms that we used to have. And then of course, once you're done making the calls and checking all the necessary boxes, it's really time intensive to input some of this data back into the system. And remember the days of using your phone and hand dialing each person on a list. Well, not anymore, right? So we'll have a new way of doing things. And then once your list is completed, you make the calls. You make the call to the list. Sometimes in the old way of doing things get lost. But now in the virtual phone banking system that we have now, everything's in the system. So once you're done making the calls, it automatically registers all the information that you input in. So what are the tools that we're using to do phone banking in 2020? Obviously, we're going to be using the van and the software, and then we're going to get tech support. And our voter files will be cut in a way that is specific to what your state is doing or what your organization is doing. Some of you guys are partners with us at APIAVote to do phone banking, and we'll work with you to provide that voter list for you and with you. With virtual phone banking, it's different than the predictive dialer, which Christine will talk a little bit about. But with the virtual phone bank, oftentimes before what we used to do is, you use your cell phone or you use your phone and then to make a call. But here we need to set up a Google voice number so that when you make the call online, it doesn't show your number, it shows a Google voice number. And that, that makes it a little bit more private in terms of, people knowing where you're calling from, what your number is. And also, if you don't see someone's information, let's say their polling information, you can always go to APIAVote's polling site where you can find out their polling location. That's one of the things that you can do while you're online, is that you can actually just jump from screen to screen and find information for them. First things first is getting into the van, and you'll get an access and log in into the van system so you can access those voter files and then start making the calls. So this is what it will look like when we set you up, and you, of course, we're also going to do a little bit of a training for you so that you can be the trainer for your volunteers, and you'll go through the same process. It's teaching them how to log into the van. And when you're online with the state voices, for example, this is Pennsylvania, when you log in, there'll be a task here where it says virtual phone bank, and that's where you click. So you can you can just sign into the virtual phone bank and create your virtual account. So this is an example of what it would look like. This is what a voter file will look like. So it will automatically pop up. This is the person that you'll be calling. So it'll dial automatically, and then it'll give you this sheet, the screen about what who the person is, whether how old they are, whether they're male or female, their van ID number. There's lots of information about them, including the phone number.
And just to clarify, this is not the predictive dialer, so you have to hand dial this.
Yeah, this is hand dialing. Yep. And so when you're contacting a person through this virtual phone dialing, you'll have a script, and we'll talk a little bit more about the script later, so that we can actually practice a little bit. But this is when you go through the script, this is when you're contacting the person, and maybe they're busy, maybe they've moved, maybe there's the wrong number, or they're not home, or there's something. So okay. So if if you can't reach a person, here are some of the keys that you look for when you can't reach them in person. If they're not home when they're called, or let's say that you call them and they say, don't call me, right? And then they hang up on you, or they move, or they say, we're busy right now. Can you call me later? So these are all the different scenarios that could happen during your call. Or if you get a busy tone, you get a disconnected number, or if they don't speak English, or maybe you can't speak their language, or maybe if they're not eligible to vote or registered to vote. But remember that this list in the van are all folks who are registered to vote. So that's how we get their information. And then also part of their profile will be their polling location, and even what precinct they're in. And then there's a bunch of information that are missing, but if you see, for example, here, they're voting in the Fairfax station, right? So make sure that they know this information. If they're unsure, while you're talking to them, they're unsure where they vote, you have this basic information that you can tell them that, this is actually where you vote, or you want to remind them that this is where they vote. And if the information is not available on the screen, for example, the poll location is not there, you can also just quickly go to APIAVote.org location. You can look up the polling address and you can plug it in, and this information then will be saved. This is what the script will look like when you are in the program. And we'll give you another sample of a script that we have for Virginia. But let's say that you go through this, say, hello, my name is Yi, I'm with APIAVote, is John available? And then you go through the script, and basically your job is to try to talk to them about the voting process and where they are in that process. And basically the end goal here is to persuade them to say, if they're already registered and if they're gonna go vote, what's your plan to vote? Do you plan to vote? Is that a yes or no? You're trying to get them to do a yes or no, or maybe, right? So, and then immediately once you arrive at that answer, there's a drop down answer, and you just click yes, no, or maybe, and then you move on. And if it's yes, you say wonderful. Maybe you can also make sure that somebody else in your family votes, or a friend, somebody else votes.
Okay.
And what their plan is for voting. And depending on what that state is, and what the rules are for absentee voting, for election day voting, and whether it's in-person voting is allowed in your area, in your state, those are information that will be tailored to your calls. And then there, on the other aspects of the call, in terms of if, when you're done with the call, of course, you thank them, and let's say you ask them a few questions about what they're concerned about in this election, or what are the most important issues that they're concerned about. And if they can give you those answers, then there's a drop-down tab where you can mark that, whether it's education, housing, immigration, or jobs. So there's some input here that you can ask some questions as a way to close out the call. Okay. Here are some myths and realities of
Sorry.
phone.
I'm
Are you
sorry,
moving this?
everyone. It's like every time I teach, I click on the screen, it keeps moving.
Wait, it's moving by itself. Okay.
Before Yi moves on, so what he just described is the virtual phone banking, but for some of the organizations where you have a large enough universe and you have enough volunteers, at minimum 8 volunteers that are willing to be on the predictive dialer at the same time, we could go ahead and have the system actually dial the numbers for you. So essentially the van dials a phone number and screens out any answering machines, no answers, disconnects, busy signals. And then as soon as they get a live person, it will be directed to one of your phone bankers. So essentially what will happen is that your volunteers will log in, and then they'll dial into a particular phone number. And then once they get connected, they literally are just sitting there with their earpieces listening for the beep. As soon as they see a beep, they'll see their screen pull up, and it will look like similar to what we had shown right here, where they'll go ahead and see the person's name, their age, whether they're male and female, and then that way they could go ahead and start the conversation with that individual. So like I said, it's only for those that have a large enough universe, and for those that will do that, we'll go ahead and sit down with you and make sure that your key organizers understand how to go ahead and log in to the predictive dialer system. Go ahead, Yi.
Yep. So these are some questions that people have. You know, what if I can't log into the van, right? So we're going to have a point person, probably it will be me at APIAVote. We'll have a number. And so, you know, let's say, for example, you're doing a phone banking, virtual phone banking with, you know, let's say 10 people, and maybe we're on a platform, some kind of you know, social media platform where we can communicate with each other as if we're sitting in the same room. And so ideally we want to pick a kind of a platform so we can all communicate. But let's say that you know, we start the phone banking session and somebody runs into a problem and not be able to log in. And so I'll be the contact person. I'll give you my number, and that way you can just call me during the, you know, during the phone banking, and then I can help you through it. So this is in preparation for when you're actually doing a live virtual phone banking session and you have questions. So do I have to read the script word for word? No. You know, so we're going to provide with script, and part of the volunteer training session will be, you know, doing role playing where you read the script, you understand what it's saying, and so you put it into your own words basically, and try to use your own words to convey the same message when you read, you know, for the script. So it's, I mean, you don't have to memorize it, but to really understand it and to practice a lot with somebody else, and that'll get the volunteers, you know, a chance to really, you know, make it flow more. So, what if you ask a question that's not, you know, in the, you know, in the list of questions? You know, who do I, you know, what do you tell the voter? So if there's something you can look up, you can obviously, you know, jump onto a different screen on Google and look it up and search it. Or, you know, like that, you know, look, for example, like the polling station lookup, the APIAVote, our website will have some of the information. And so we'll provide that information for you so you can actually look at certain things pretty quickly. And then if people have questions during the call, be sure to take down their number and a name so that we can call them back, you know, or somebody will call them back. Because some of these systems, once you talk to that person, the numbers disappear, and you don't, you know, you can't you can't find the number anymore. The name's not there anymore. So be sure that during the call you take the name and number and you can call them back. We're not leaving any messages, right? And so, can the person speak to other members of the household? Yes. Sometimes when we call this number, there'll be 3 or 4 people in the family that are voters. So once you're done talking to that person, maybe you can say, you know, is Andy also home? Can I talk to him about voting? Or let's say somebody says, oh, my husband is here too. Now I'll just tell him that you called. But you do want to know whether they're going to go vote. And it's basically the same questions apply to all the people in the house. And the reason this is important is because if we don't get everybody in the household to have the conversation, then they're going to get 3 more calls if there are 4 people in that family, basically, right? So, so that family maybe getting more calls if you don't get all of them together. So it's nice if you can talk to all of the people in that family. Yep, here are some of the, so is every number on the call correct? There'll be lots of, there'll be, you should expect that there'll be wrong numbers and a lot of disconnected lines. And so when we talk and we train our volunteers, we should also let them know that, all the ideas they have about being a phone banker, there are lots of myths and realities about actually making phone calls. We're calling a lot through a lot of people, a lot of this. So every voter is listed as API. So, our effort is to reach out to every low propensity API voter out there. Sometimes they'll be misidentified as API, but still you should, once you get them on the line, you should still ask them to vote and go through this and go through the script. Every voter will be happy that you called, right? Imagine you guys taking calls right now from people who take surveys, right? Not always. You'll be calling them at times when they're maybe they're doing their virtual homework with their kids, right? Or they don't want to be bothered like during dinner. So there's no right time to call them, but just be sure to know that not everybody will welcome your call. And so learn to work with them and learn to find out when how you can speak to them. Every voter will speak to you with respect and kindness. Yep, they will, right? So just be prepared to, to be patient and also to remain professional, to remain courteous on your part. Respect and kindness on your part goes a long way, even though you may not know who's on the other end. So this is a way to, going back a little bit to what we talked about setting up the Google Voice. This is a way to log into the Google account and to basically pick a fake number through Google so that when you do the call, then it can't be traced back to you as a person. So this is how we're this is a way we set up for Google Voice. So it'll look like this. You'll pick a number, probably wherever you are, or you'll get a number, and then you add the number to it.
Actually, if you want to go back, okay, so what you'll do is first you'll choose a Google number as you can see right here, but then they do need to tie it to a cell phone. So you do have to enter your smartphone, and so then that way they could go ahead and send you a text message to verify that this is tied to someone real. And then once they do that, then you enter that number verification into the system. So we just wanted to make sure that you realize that it's just that not anyone could just sign up for a Google number. It does have to be verified and tied to a cell phone number. And you do have the opportunity to change it. For those of you who are just phone banking, like in Wisconsin, you could just stick with one Google number. But for APIAVote, many of our phone bankers, we were switching from Pennsylvania to Wisconsin. So they would actually be on different days, they would switch up their Google number and choose a area code that would fit the location that they were calling into.
Yeah, and sometimes it is better when people see the number and it looks like it's a number from local number instead of some odd looking number that they say, who's calling me, right? So, so even though we're doing things virtually and on the phone, here are just some reminders. You do have to smile even though you're on the phone, people can't see you. And it does make a difference when people smile and they talk. It sounds different than people who are not smiling and talking like this, right? So I think it's important that we make sure our volunteers put on a smile when they make a call. And you do sound more friendly and cheerful when you smile and make a call. And then also during the call, talk about issues that you care about as a volunteer or as a community organizer. Because, when you open up and talk about issues you care about, then they tend to open up and talk about issues they care about. And of course it leads into the, the idea that they need to get out there and vote. So after 30 minutes, you make sure that you check to see how the volunteers are doing. And always during the conversation, remain nonpartisan. We're a nonpartisan effort. So don't tell them who to vote for or what party they should vote for, or say something negative about the other party or any candidate, because our job is just to get people out to vote. And the decision who to vote for and what party, that's their prerogative as a voter. So part of preparing for a phone bank is to role play and to review the script. And this is done during the training for volunteers for phone banking. So you should pair up folks and work on the script, and then and then throw the questions back and forth so that so that volunteers are comfortable with questions that they may get from the voter, or questions that you might have about the system, or how to respond to a script, or how to respond to an answer, or a question or an answer. With virtual phone banking, there are obviously a lot more information that will be available about the voter, and then also other voters in the household. And then, unlike the old days, we the data entry, we don't do any data entry. Whatever people's answers to some of your questions you asked during the script, it'll be immediately entered in there into the system, so you don't actually have to keep track. And you don't have to keep a paper list of phone numbers and people you're calling, and no chance of any list getting lost because the list is provided in the van. So for this, for the way that we're going to do phone banking, these are the requirements that you should ask, every volunteer to have. They need to have a computer and internet connection that is reliable. If they have, internet connection that is maybe shoddy, I think you got to make sure that wherever they are, because they're not going to be in the same room, and you can't physically check them. You just need to make sure that they test their internet connection to make sure that it's good and steady and won't drop off. A landline or a cell phone, and just because there's so many gadgets out there, we prefer that a computer, a laptop, a desktop work better than tablets. And so once you have all this information, it's really planning, how to do a successful phone bank with however many volunteers that you can get to do your list. I know that some of the partners we're working with, we have a set number of voters we need to reach, and so we already have a calculated number of volunteers that we need to recruit, or have already recruited, because the phone banking is going to happen in a couple of weeks here. So part of the setup is to really make sure, because we're not all coming into somebody's office and using the desk and phone lines. We're all going to be in our own home on our computer. So there's some preparation that you need to make sure that your volunteers are prepped for, which is having a phone system, internet access, make sure they're comfortable, because it's going to be a couple of hours shift, right? When you do your phone calls, and it could be a 2-hour shift, it could be a 4-hour shift with breaks in between. So just make sure that you have things set up for each individual, and also before you start, their plan, identify who's a trainer, who will be the trainer for these volunteers who are going to come and do a phone bank, and make sure that so there's a point person, right? There's a point person that's running the phone bank. If they have questions, I'll be, for example, I'll be available, but on your team, that you have somebody who could troubleshoot during phone banking session. Just things to prep. Some of this are not relevant anymore, but just in case you do need to, maybe print the script, just so you have it. in the shuffle of between screens, you might not be able to find it, but if you have it on a piece of paper, you can still use that.
Actually, this is still relevant, folks.
Yeah.
So even though you may be doing it at different locations, we still ask that all the volunteers still make sure that they have this all printed out and they have ready paper, pens, because typically this is still the setup that volunteer phone bankers still should have to prepare for them.
Yeah, and especially the Q&A stuff. If you run into an issue with the Q&A sheet, that would really be helpful. And I think the tally sheet is also really important because, I mean, you're doing this virtually, and so it's everything's being registered in the system. But I think for your purposes, when you're doing your phone bank, it's really critical that everybody has a tally sheet so that when they make a call, and at the end of the call, they're able to say yes or no, right? So how many yeses did you guys get during this phone banking session, right, as a team? So it'd be important to keep a tally of your efforts, because it may take a while for us to go through the system and to get a report back to see how many people you reach and how many people said yes, they're going to go vote. It may take a little while to get that information back to you, but for your purposes, I think it's good to know right away at the end of the shift how many people you reached. And then you can also celebrate, right? And make people feel good that they spent, let's say, 4 hours doing phone banking and you're able to hit a certain number for that shift. And that's pretty good, right? So it gives a lot of confidence and motivation for them to do it the next time, or other people to do it the next time, maybe to beat that score. Christine, you want to talk a little bit about the specifics of the sample scripts?
No, I think I already went through it in the beginning part. So.
Okay, so we're gonna work with a lot of you as partners to make sure that we have the script that will fit, for you and the information that is relevant to your state. So we'll work with you on the script.
And then just to note that this is really just a sample of one of our scripts near the end, over like the end of October for GOTV. But your scripts will vary at the beginning, because that is the beginning of the process where you're going to be focusing a lot more about making a plan to vote and early voting options. So this will shift. So just realize that this is just the basic structure for your scripts and FAQs.
And by the time that we do the phone banking, like I said before, our mailer they would have received a mailer from us, and so it would have some of the information that they are looking for, and so it will be important to also have maybe to refer to that same information on the mailer, because some of the mailer may have deadlines for registration. It could have, so maybe by the time that you call, it might be too late, but if for some states, but there are other states where they have same day registration, or maybe other states where they have, the deadline has not passed yet, and so that information is still relevant during your call. So this is about training the volunteers, and spend a good 30 minutes to do a training for your volunteers before you actually set up. You could do a Zoom training session at your own choosing, and then you can set up the phone banking at a different date. But it's good to have an actual event for training, so that you could really get them, greased up for the calls, the call making. These are just an example of what a training would entail. Make sure that everyone feels like they're part of a team. They're doing, they're doing, it's a team effort, and introduce it. Make sure you introduce people so that they know who the other phone bankers are and their contact information, and identify the purpose of the call, you know, what this whole thing is about, what we talked about before, what the purpose of the phone banking is. It's really to get out the vote. And also just go over some of the state specific, you know, FAQ information, and then spend a good chunk of that time doing the role playing of the phone script. And, you know, partner up with other people, and maybe if you have a large training group in a Zoom call, you could put them into different rooms and come back after maybe 10 minutes and, you know, and share what their role playing activities look like and what questions they have. And then also what the expectation of the phone banking session that you'll do. For example, if let's say you do have a field plan and a goal for how many, you know, you want to reach, and what your goals or expectations are for that phone bank. And again, reminding, you know, your volunteers to be, you know, to smile, to be proactive, and to talk about the issues they care about. And also maybe even during the calls, they may run into people on the calls that seem enthusiastic about voting. You know, this is also a chance for you to ask them to see maybe if they can join the phone banking volunteer team. Get the information and name down, call them. And then, you know, just doing check-ins, you know, when you're actually in the phone banking session, whatever virtual platform you use to be in touch with each other as a team, we need, you know, maybe to have that captain, right? The phone banking captain, maybe whose job it is to just not phone bank, but whose job it is to make sure that all the volunteers are doing what they're supposed to be doing and checking in to see if they run into issues or problems. So we do need a person to be checking in with the volunteers during the phone banking session. And then after the phone banking session, you know, debrief with the volunteers. Spend, you know, 5-10 minutes to debrief about, you know, how it went, and what questions they have, and what new recommendations they have for the next phone banking session. And then, of course, be sure to, many of them will do, you know, our volunteers are spending 2 or 4 hours to help us reach our API community. So be sure to thank them, to send them an email, send them a text a couple of days later or a day later. And that's really it. I mean, that's the crux of phone banking in this new era. And we're gonna need a lot of practice, but I think that I know that you guys already are doing this. Many of you have done this many times before. And so if you have any questions or anything to add to this presentation, you know, welcome all of them. And so that we can make this training available and better for folks who are gonna join our volunteer effort to reach out to our communities. So thank you everyone for your time. If you have any questions, if you can drop those questions into the chat, or I think if we can unmute everybody, if you have any questions, we could entertain them.
So if you have a question, I could go ahead and unmute you. So then that way you could go ahead and directly ask your question. So maybe what I'll do is, Shirley, so we could discuss your question. So the question is, I guess, I'm wanting to learn how to use phone banking effectively as an outreach tool for census counting. So what we've seen is that a lot of different organizations, they've been either combing through their own lists, or they've been using the voter files to go ahead and call individuals that are not necessarily part of their own natural universe as an organization, to be able to expand their reach to talk about voting as well as about census. So at least during September, a lot of the phone banking operations are really talking about both opportunities. Are there other questions?
So this is just for Jeff, who's wondering whether this is going to be available. This is recorded, so we can make this available for any volunteers for your organization to use.
And one other thing I just wanted to add is that, you know, because we are more than likely people are going to be conducting phone banking virtually, where you're not gathering in an office or a local area. You're really depending on individuals to be at home to make the calls. To be able to motivate individuals, it really is highly recommended. A lot of the phone banking operations are, as Yi had noted, either coming on board on GChat, or they may, if they have enough bandwidth on their Wi-Fi, to actually use Zoom, so that way they all can see each other. And as the organizer, you from time to time, you may have like a check-in with everyone just to say, hey, everyone, like report in, like how many numbers, how many dials have you had? Or like, can someone share like a really great story? You know, you want to try to continue to be engaging and uplifting, so that way the time will pass. Otherwise, sometimes phone banking for several hours, you know, it can be tedious if you're doing it by yourself. But if you feel like you're doing it with the community, the time will fly by a lot quicker. Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions, we'll just go ahead and end it early. And so we look forward to working with everyone as you move forward in your phone banking operations. As he said, Yi's going to be your main point of contact. Chris Fan, who's also on our team, will also be someone that, especially for those of you who you're relying on APIAVote to cut your lists and actually set up your scripts and uploading all that type of information. You'll also be seeing her, and she'll be another person that you'll be working with on our APIAVote team as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon. Yi, any other parting words?
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. We'll see you on the trails.